This is Sales Players, and I'm your host, Jesse Woodbury. I've spent my career selling for early stage companies, and now I'm on a mission to help reps and operators find tips, strategies, and resources for generating more pipeline, closing more deals, and building wealth in tech sales. To learn more, visit salesplayers.co. I want to welcome Fidel Cashflow, the infamous Fidel Cashflow, onto Sales Players. How you doing, man?
Hey, Jesse, how are you doing today? Appreciate the invite. I'm excited to speak with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been following you now for a little bit, and I have so many questions. I was telling you just now off the air that we could take this in a million different directions, and I could probably kill the rest of your Friday asking all the questions I have, but I won't do that to you. And I think a really good starting point for listeners would be, tell us first how you got started in tech sales, and then tell us how you got into the Wi-Fi monies part of what you do, the side hustling and creating content and building communities and things like that. So yeah, start with the tech sales background.
Yeah, great question. So I've been in tech sales 7 years now, in May. I got originally started pretty early on while attending university. Got connected with an early stage pre-seed startup company. Was the very first SDR hire. Was very much working directly with the first time founder, a part of those conversations around GTM strategy, fundraising rounds, product development, marketing, just kind of being a sponge in that sort of fast paced environment. Gained a lot of knowledge within that 24-month span, which led me through time to graduate from university. Then was actually also simultaneously a part of a professional B2B sales program at the university as well too. So
Nice.
was pre-graduation placed at a Fortune 500 company at a inside sales role.
Yeah, that's amazing. Those didn't exist when I was going to school. Otherwise, I would have totally done something like that.
Yeah, it can be very hit or miss. Fortunately, did a little bit of homework on professor, his background and his corporate connections within the region, the local area. So he had some pretty good corporate connections. Joined that larger organization, and that kind of was a stark contrast compared to the startup world, especially that early stage of a company. So that caught early traction working inside of a large company that kind of already had a well-defined sales process, brand recognition, all these different sort of things. So
Yeah.
that landed me at President's Club pretty quickly within my first fiscal year there.
Wow.
And then eventually transitioned from that point into a true outbound SMB AE position at another public company. Did 18 months, somewhere between 18 to 24 months there. And, externally promoted into a mid-market role. Very similar pattern, as you guys can see here, another 24 months or so. And that lands me to present day, currently in an enterprise account executive role with another Fortune 500 company.
Now, it sounds like you started in a seed series or, pre-series A type company. Have you ever gone back to a startup, or have you mainly stayed the kind of big company course?
Yeah, from that point on, I've stayed the big company course. Really my sort of ethos and a lot of the content I create on social media, Twitter specifically, is centered around like folks trying to land themselves inside of great, fast growing organizations. Ideally, the larger the infrastructure that's behind you early in your career. I saw more personal success being in that sort of environment, as well as some of the folks that I help, join those sorts of companies.
Yeah, that's I've done a little bit of both, and I agree. Like the big companies from a benefits work life balance standpoint, you really can't beat working for big tech. I'm kind of crazy in that I like being at early startups. I guess I feel the need to feel needed or something. And
Right.
so I like to be, I for some reason to put some pressure on my shoulders. So I've kind of like pivoted back and forth between the two, but I totally agree. And I saw a post you made about how, if you're someone who also wants to create content or build a, side business or a side hustle, it's tough to do that if you're in an early stage startup, because the demand on your hours and your attention and frankly your creative juices just start to drain pretty quickly when you're in an early stage environment, because you're having to be creative every day, and it's hard to focus on side hustle stuff if so much attention's on your day job. So I think that's a pretty sound plan. Let me ask this. What do you think? It sounds like you've kind of had a pretty fast track, 7 years in the industry. You're already in the enterprise account executive role. It sounds like you've hit President's Club a bunch of times. You've had some big numbers you've put up. Do you feel like you've done anything different that other people aren't doing that would maybe be your secret sauce? And I know you talk about this stuff pretty transparently on X, but maybe some other insights you could share on what you might have done differently to get you super successful super quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm super successful. Out of the 7 years, I hit President's Club twice. There's definitely some people that I know inside of the industry, people within my network that have had more accolades and more success in their career, but I really just try to follow the money, right? Like, is this organization doing well? Like, what is my due diligence before I join this organization? Can I plug in where I don't have to reinvent the wheel, but, just repeat what success has already looked like? So I'm really big on networking, like inside of these larger organizations, right? Like these people that were recently promoted, for example, from SMB to mid-market. What are the sort of details or best practices that I can get from those people, right? And then how can I work it into my particular style to where, I can follow the money all the way down to prospecting to increasing, deal velocity and ultimately hitting my number and ideally outperforming on what the number looks like. So, it's sort of kind of a humble approach, although, Fidel may seem the exact opposite for marketing purposes on Twitter, and very much a student of the game and very humble inside of my career of, I understand that I don't know all of my answers and that you can build a long-term career, maybe multiple decades in this space. So I choose the guarantee path, right? Maybe not ultimately, getting that great big exit or equity options, or maybe even compensation and compared to some of these higher risk, higher reward opportunities. But, that consistency and sustainability is personally what interests me.
That's awesome. So let's shift gears. I want to hear, so I'll tell kind of how I stumbled across your content. And to be honest, man, it blew my mind that you have so many followers and that you have so many people in the Desperados community, because in my mind, and maybe I'm old school, as it was like, there's all these LinkedIn influencers out there hawking courses and stuff like that. But a lot of them like put their profile out there and you can see where they worked. And so I was like, man, that's pretty crazy. This guy's built enough credibility and trust on social media that people are paying you for coaching and they're paying to be part of your community and you're completely anonymous. So the question for you is kind of, how did that start? What was the logic behind being fully anonymous? I think I know what the answer is, but I want to hear, your take on that. And then, how did you start kind of dipping your toe into the Wi-Fi money side of what you do?
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to my previous point, like just observe the Twitter space, that sort of environment, channel and social media, and saw what was working and repeated the pattern. Right. So I, have multiple, quote unquote mentors that I modeled the account based off of. It's kind of a culmination in style, of people that run larger accounts that were also anonymized as well too, for OPSEC purposes, protection over the career, being able to have a little bit more of an unfiltered take that's in contrast in comparison to the LinkedIn influencer that can only go so far, maybe so deep into particular topics. Fidel Castro is the exact opposite, right? It's raw truth, unfiltered, whether you like it or not. And if you are the audience member listening and you identify with some of the stories or maybe some of the alpha or the challenges, then we have a community to dig into that a little bit deeper. That's sort of the pitch.
Yeah. I think I said this off the air, but like I'm kicking myself that I didn't think of doing something like this, because I agree that at a certain point, if you create content, especially content around tech sales and, career development and all that stuff, unless you're like fully independent, you really can't say things how they are. And there's some creators that are on LinkedIn that maybe they're not worried about getting fired or whatever, but there's definitely like a line in the sand, like you can't cross. And so I think it was really smart to go about it in an anonymous way, because you can sort of be real and talk about topics you want to talk about and go as critical or non-critical as you want to go on some topic. Whereas, if you were just a public facing LinkedIn profile, and you're working a corporate job, W-2, then eventually you're going to hit a wall where you can't say certain things or talk about certain things. So I love the idea. And honestly, it's a new world for me because I've been following a lot of people on LinkedIn for a long time, but this whole sales Twitter, sales X, with a lot of like anonymous folks out there posting content, it means you've got to produce really good content because you have to be able to prove that you know what the fuck you're talking about and get followers that way. So like, I think it's definitely, there's something there. So yeah, so when did the light bulb go off when you were like, I got to start posting these ideas and get these thoughts out there into the atmosphere?
So it started in the beginning. I was a consumer of information, right? Very much a student of the game. I remember attending university in that very first SDR role where I didn't have other SDRs that I could model, methodologies or best practices from. I was scrolling on LinkedIn with the exact same sales influencers that are still around to this day. Scrolling on Twitter, just for whatever reason, that was the preferred social media platform for me to get information. And, there wasn't many people that were sharing insights when it came to tech sales. Like I would go into the search bar and type in SaaS and, the result would be something completely different. I would type in tech sales, right? I'd be typing in these sort of tactics and trying to learn best practices. And there was really no content being made, back in 2018, even recently up to, I'd say about 2022, 2023, there are more content creators or just individuals sharing insights relevant for the B2B sales professional. So along the way, just shared insights, after the 9 to 5 or maybe in between meetings, observations, whether they were a win loss or something in between, because I could remember back to that day when I was, 20 years old, searching for answers and there was nothing to be found. So that was kind of the original, point of creating the account. And then from there, people are going to engage with you, questions, comments, they send you frequent DMs and they were requesting more and more, whether it's like executive resume writing or, hey, can you check out this company? I just got an offer for it. And I just came to the realization that even though I would say in perspective, I don't have a very, long career, right? There's definitely people that have more experience and insights, but I can always kind of circle back to that, first year AE, brand new SDR to the industry and provide them a little bit of guidance.
Yeah. And that tracks too. So I launched this channel in 2020 and it used to be called SaaS Sales Players. I changed it to Sales Players just to try to sort of widen the scope a little bit. But it was the same thing that at the time, the idea for this was that I felt like there wasn't enough people talking and I was consuming a bunch of stuff, but I didn't feel like there was enough expertise out there. There really wasn't a lot of other, as crazy as it sounds, there wasn't a lot of other podcasts that spoke to the day-to-day individual contributor sellers.
Right.
There was a good amount of like sales leadership podcasts or revenue leadership podcasts, but there wasn't a lot of shows or channels or anything like that spoke to people that were every day trying to do deals, especially like the enterprise type deals that I was working on getting my teeth cut in. And so that's why I launched the show, is because right before I launched this, I had closed my first kind of 6-figure annual enterprise deal. And so I was like, I think I have enough to talk about that, like I can add some value to people, especially if they're coming up and they haven't done that yet. And there's just really no one talking about this. So someone needs to talk about it. And that's kind of how I fell into it in 2020. But agree. And that was the itch I was trying to scratch, was like, I'm learning, but there's just not enough content out there. And now it's super saturated. There's like 1 billion people on LinkedIn posting all their crazy attainment numbers and everything else. And it's, it's kind of gotten, I think the bubble will pop at some point, but, that's why I think content like yours is so interesting though, because it kind of blends a few different realities.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to software and SaaS specifically, it's an expansive space, right? Like general alpha, it typically falls flat, right? Like whether you're selling cybersecurity or maybe it's ERP, like when it comes to specific sales tactics or methodologies, they're gonna result in different outcomes, right? So specificity, I think, is kind of what's missing here. But that's kind of the burden to be shouldered by the content creator, right?
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, this is a question that is genuinely coming from me because as someone who's tried to grow an audience over the last 5 years, mostly on LinkedIn and then through this channel, the podcast, it's super challenging. It's not a linear, it's typically not linear in terms of growth. When did you start to see some of those big, kind of hockey stick growth lines in your followers or, growth of your communities, those sorts of things?
I would say engagement from larger accounts, B2B sales adjacent. Um, I could remember the moment, I believe I gained like 500 to almost maybe 1,000 followers within like 24 hours or 48 hours. I got a
Nice.
quote tweet, shout out to Boatside Sales Guy, a quote tweet from him, and he has something like 50,000 followers. So people that were already following his account, they were in the tech sales space or interested in it, followed the account. And then from there, really just like collaborating with other creators is probably the best path to success there.
Got it. Got it. And then when did you launch your first product? Because, it sounds like you built an audience. At what point did you say, I've got to now put something out there? Did it start with coaching or was it a membership community? How did you go about that?
Yeah. So I shipped it super early. I was at about like 1,500 followers, and there was demand built up. Given that Fidel is sort of a niche account, right? It's not your traditional software sales account, right? I kind of have a mixed bag of tweets, unfiltered in all aspects, right? Whether it's lifestyle, whether it's business, whether it's sales insights. So it's a great way to qualify my audience, and people that follow my account. Higher conversion rates with it as well too. So felt like at the 1,500 follower mark, we were ready. And at that point, I launched the community. So the Desperado sales community, today we're sitting at about 670, 672 B2B sellers, people that are looking to get inside of tech sales or actively selling, contract stacking. And the idea behind that was building a historical record of general Q&A questions, right? So from anything when it comes to building a better resume, to conducting a cold call, to email copywriting, to even maybe some deal negotiations, we have separate individual topic rooms where people drop questions kind of on demand, get that answered either by Fidel or somebody that's more senior inside of the group that can provide them a little bit of feedback on what they're currently working on. That was the idea of the community. And honestly, it's gotten kind of out of hand at this point.
Tell us more about that. What's gotten out of hand about it? Is it just, it's a lot of noise or
Yeah,
share
just the
more?
management of it, right?
Yeah.
Try to be there, available, and provide that like personalized support. But as we continue to scale, unfortunately, like that's just not possible, especially not managed the 9 to 5. But it's really interesting, human behavior and psychology behind a community. If
Yeah.
people that are more senior inside of the group, as they begin to progress inside of their career from, for example, SDR to, I got a guy in my community, he's been there for, gosh, almost the full 2 years now. He's a mid-market account executive. Like he has that level of insight now that he can pass down as well too.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one question I had for you is it seems like, you're almost superhuman in your time because I know you post on social several times a day. I know managing a community is already very time consuming. My community is not quite as big as yours. And even then I get quite a bit of outreach, DMs in our Slack channel. But then also creating content takes time because there's you have to kind of get into a creative headspace if you're going to post or write content or whatever it is. How do you block your day and what does a typical day look like?
Yeah. So typical day, probably get up around like 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Start my day, I'd say 8 o'clock, no later than 8 o'clock. Begin the 9 to 5 and try to knock out the 9 to 5 before I'd say 3:30 p.m. the latest, right?
Yeah.
So about 8 to 3 p.m. And everything's centered around efficiency. I'm sure that we'll have a conversation around contract stacking later,
Yeah.
but outsourcing as much as possible to virtual assistants, like whether that's coming up with tweets, observations throughout the day, sending it to the virtual assistant to then tweet it out for me on my behalf throughout the day. When it comes to the 9 to 5, like trying to outsource as much as possible from an administration perspective, whether it's lead list building, writing email copy, whatever it may be, to those virtual assistants to where I get maximum coverage and productivity out of my day. So that's really the key there.
Can you help a brother out on like where do you find good virtual assistants? Because that's an area I need to get into because I'm at that tipping point where it's tough to run my coaching business, create content, have a community, but also have a 9 to 5 day job. Where can one go find good virtual assistant help?
Yeah, ph.jobs is probably the best resource, right? Overseas in the Philippines, you can take advantage of the, currency exchange there. You can hire a VA for as low as, I don't know, $2.50, and they go all the way up, maybe even $20 per hour. ph.jobs is a great one. Outside of that, Upwork, I find that Nigeria also has a good value and great people and workers as well too.
Interesting. Okay, now this is definitely the next phase for me is getting some help, and that makes a lot of sense when I know now that you're delegating a lot of things out to assistants, and that can kind of free up your time to focus on like the highest priority in that moment.
100%.
Do you travel at all for your day job?
Regionally, not too far.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because I know sometimes for me, whenever I'm actually going on the road here in a couple of weeks, and I'm like, okay, I got to try to bake some content out before that because I'm going to basically lose over a week in the sense that I'll have to recover afterwards. And when you go to a trade show which is what I'm going to, it drains you so much that it's hard to get creative or do anything outside of the focus on that. But it sounds like you're not having to do too much road warrior stuff.
Yeah, typically virtual, regionally for necessary meetings that are more serious. So that's going to be less frequency compared to on a daily basis. But yeah, I mean, everything is try to think of myself as a business owner, and again, like you said, what's the highest return on investment task that I can make today, and everything else should be $2 an hour jobs.
I love that. I've talked about this on the show before, that the best salespeople are actually business people first, and then sales is just part of that. Because if you want to scale anything, even if it's like, hey, I'm an enterprise account executive, I don't have a side hustle, there's still so many things that you have to optimize for so that you're focused on the highest priority task, that you're doing the revenue generating activities that are going to get you the outcomes you want. So I love your approach on that. That's so awesome.
Yeah, really, I wanted to highlight beta transparency. There are trade-offs, right? Of course, there are trade-offs, with the time management as well as performance. Like I have seen an impact in my performance in my 9 to 5, managing the community, and the days of 150% plus quota attainment are a conscious decision that I've opted out of. Right at this point, I'm looking at maintaining, quota attainment. Hitting OTE, that's, for me personally, what's to be expected from the 9 to 5, and, majority time that's being allocated is to the one business.
That's so interesting. And I've never heard anyone else talk about that, but a really, really close friend and mentor of mine who's been doing this tech sales thing for, I think, coming up on 20 years. And he's been the top rep at different companies over the years. But he told me in private once, he's like, you know what, you should try to not shoot to be the number one rep because once you get there, the pressure intensifies, and then the company starts looking for ways to screw your territory up and take accounts away from you or raise your number or whatever it is. And so I've thought about that a lot, which early in my career was always like, all right, how do I become the top rep of the company? And now the older I get and the longer I've been doing this, I'm like, how do I just get I just want to do the required job, right? I'm not trying to go and kill myself for an extra 50% attainment, right? It's like, let's just do the 100% or as close to it. And it was crazy to hear that from my buddy my mentor who'd been doing this for a long time, who's been a top guy. And he's like, trust me, when you get to the top, it gets pretty lonely, and they will find a way to make your life harder. So it's not even worth it.
Yeah, it just depends on what personal goals are, right? Like me personally, I've been transparent about this. Like I'm not interested in a multi-decade career in B2B software sales. Plan on making an exit in the short term, probably the next 3 to 4 years, to running the businesses full time. But, if your preferred personal professional goals are to be a strategic enterprise, named account executive, then yeah, 100% push for that performance. The behaviors need to follow the goals.
Yep. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about contract stacking. It's not a term I had heard of before following your content. Tell listeners just what it is and how you help your community start on that journey.
Yeah. So pretty interesting story that came across my desk, for lack of better words, organically, where during COVID, I noticed online on Twitter, what we call like money Twitter or sales Twitter, where the overemployment model was becoming more and more popular. Overemployment model, you can see some threads on Reddit or maybe on Twitter where these software engineers were working multiple W-2 jobs, right? And there was an example that went viral, millions of views. This guy shared a story about he's a senior software engineer at multiple public companies and he W-2 like $1 million or something.
It's crazy.
I'm not sure the validity to that story. Also, do not job stack W-2 roles for compliance or maybe even legal purposes. I think I have to say that. But
Yeah.
it sparked a light bulb moment in my mind. Just thinking back to my career, when I was first hired as an SDR, I was not a W-2 employee. I was an independent contractor, right? No benefits, PTO, anything like that. So I went online looking for other SDR contract opportunities, and there was an entire job market that I stumbled across on websites like Upwork, Well Found Jobs, a little bit on Fiverr, remote.co, early stage startup companies, bootstrap or pre-seed, where they lack capital, the resources can demand from the job market, or go to the job market and pay an SDR, maybe, for example, a $60,000 base salary and OTE of $90,000 for it. Well, unfortunately, they're not in the position to make that investment. That first time founder kind of is the account executive, very similar to the environment in which I was introduced to B2B sales. But they're looking for independent contractors to work for, let's say, anywhere between $20 to all the way up to $40 per hour. Well, I applied that overemployment model and coupled it with these SDR contract positions, taking into consideration all the sales tools that I was familiar with inside of my 9-to-5. So, power dialers and utilizing virtual assistants, prospecting tools and automation. In 2025, what we've established inside of our community, including myself, you can essentially job stack multiple SDR roles up to 6 figures.
Wow.
And the ultimate goal is to reduce a 40-hour work into 15 hours per week.
That is so awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, so 40 down to 15, and that's because of using, technology as sort of the force multiplier.
Yeah, technology is the force multiplier, plus hiring virtual assistants full time to take care of things, for example, like lead list building, trigger event finding and researching accounts, managing email campaigns, managing communication with those contract clients, managing sending LinkedIn messages and connecting with people. You should be able to outsource everything inside of that SDR role besides actually making the cold calls yourself. Of course, that comes down to qualifying the opportunity. If it's a good fit, if you do identify the good fit, you should, we teach people on how to turn that into a full-time role into 15 hours. So if you complete the KPIs, that client happy, and you're working 3 hours per day, you still have an additional 5, maybe 6 hours to pick up multiple clients to fill up the rest of your.
Amazing. And it's an obvious way to start too, especially if you don't have any experience. Because what I tell a lot of my coaching clients is like, unfortunately, tech is a pretty there's a lot of gatekeeping. And so if you're coming from outside of the industry and you're trying to get a W-2 job at a top company, it's going to be a real uphill battle. And you got to get really creative on your story. So I'm guessing this is a way that people can go and kind of get the chops and have a lot of great, success stories they can share in an interview. So if they ever do want to pivot into, a nice W-2 role, they'll have a bunch of exposure to outbounding and, booking stuff, building pipeline, all the things that you need to have in order to go and interview and get in, get a foot in the door at a bigger company.
Yeah, 100%. A part of the reason why I pushed this, let's say for lack of better words, entry point or career path for the tech sales community was I was receiving a lot of DMs of folks that didn't have the degree that were looking to work for public companies, and a lot of the content I was talking about joining larger organizations. Well, unfortunately, there still is a barrier to entry in some companies, right? Mm-hmm. If, for example, you have a criminal past or you don't have a college degree, you can take an entry point into SDR contract stacking, add that to the resume with professional SDR experience, and later leverage that for inside sales roles or executive roles, maybe even a corporate BDR role in the future.
Wow. And so is the Desperado community is the main focus to help folks figure out the contract stacking stuff, or is there other, ancillary topics that get discussed? I'm sure there's a lot of topics that get discussed, but is the main theme, how to enter into that world of contract stacking?
Yeah, it's a general B2B tech sales community. So we do have some corporate, BDRs, account executives, even some startup founders inside of there. But yeah, the primary, I would say, audience inside of that community are people that are looking to get contract stacking or actively contract stacking at this point.
Awesome. What are some of the tools you recommend to your community that you're super excited about in the sales tech space or in the AI space also, since that's a very hot topic right now?
Yeah, I would like to give another quick shout out to, his name is Pontiff Flex on Twitter. He created a product called Orion. It's an email infrastructure software. You can get signed up for $50 per month, and instantly, same day, you can send out 500 cold emails per email address. So that's one of the tools we use to run massive volume, utilizing VAs to hit the standard KPIs that they expect from you, whatever it is, 3 to 4 qualified appointments per week. You can invest into that technology, get multiple domains, and send, for example, thousands of emails per day. Wow. That's a really powerful tool. I also really like Orem when it comes to contract stacking. That's an AI powered power dialer that allows you to call, I don't know, I believe it's like 10 to 12 people simultaneously.
Wow. Yeah, we had, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but one of the sales leaders from Orem came on the show a while back, but it's a very cool product.
Yeah. So everything's about, we take a researched approach. I try to share a little bit more about the enterprise prospecting strategy to be efficient when it comes to pre-call planning and territory planning for people that are contract stacking, but you need the tools and the team behind you to hit the targets that you need, for sure.
So what's next for you? It sounds like you've got sort of call it a 5-year plan. It sounds like it might be even shorter than that. And it's funny because it's very similar to mine. I want to retire from tech sales and do, entrepreneurship stuff, lifestyle type businesses full time within 5 years. I'm kind of getting to the end of my patience in the industry. I've been doing this for a while now, and I'm on the doorstep of age 40. And so I got to come up with a plan. I really don't want to spend my 40s doing tech sales stuff if I can help it. At least unless I've got, some big upside, right? And I really like owning things. I like building operations and stuff like that. So it sounds like we have some similar goals, but tell us about, what's coming next for you and what other launches are you working on? Would love to hear that.
Yeah. So I'm currently 27. I set a target for myself by 30. Should have collected the necessary skills when it comes to sales and prospecting and generating new business to also get into some sort of business ownership. Taking a look at more brick and mortar businesses right now, it's pretty interesting seeing a lot of the S&B acquisition activity that's currently happening from business owners that are retired right now. I can see myself getting into that sort of business. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like right now. Need to hit my number here before 30, before making that move. But that's sort of been the long-term plan from the beginning, is get the skill set, the business acumen through B2B software sales, and then leverage those skills for something bigger.
That's the thing that people don't tell you, I guess, early on, sometimes in your career. And no one told me this, but then when I got into tech sales, the guys that were over 40 were like, you've got to figure out an exit strategy at some point. And that exit strategy can be going into leadership or doing, channel sales or something like that. That's totally a path, but it's very hard on you to just be an enterprise account executive for multiple decades. There's definitely people that do it and nothing wrong with it. But if you're someone who's entrepreneurial, who's someone who wants to build things, it can kind of grind on you for year over year. Let me ask this. Do you have a family, or are you able to share if you have, do you have kids or a house, those kind of things, or are you pretty nimble in that way?
Yeah. Fiance,
Nice.
children here in a couple of years, in the wedding planning process, at the moment, that sort of craziness. Once we get the wedding knocked out, the children, then the house and everything like that.
Well, you're doing it the smart way, because you're building, again, the side hustle, Wi-Fi money, cash flow, and able to kind of now pivot towards entrepreneurship while you have kids. Because I kind of did it the other way. I had kids, and then unfortunately that delayed my time frame for retiring from tech sales, because it's like, oh man, these things are expensive, and having a mortgage is kind of expensive, and yeah, planning a wedding is definitely expensive. But it's good that you got a head start before getting into all that stuff. You've kind of already got, a framework and a path to the exit.
Yeah, 100%. And it goes back to, like, it wasn't all my observations and strategy. Like, a lot of this stuff is a what's the right word for it? Laid out path for people that I've watched inside of the industry, whether it's influencers that had a successful career, or modeling it off of. Now that you're on sales Twitter, are you aware of Bowtie Bull?
Yes. Yeah. I've seen his stuff.
Bowtie Bull, everything that I talk about, software sales plus Wi-Fi money, that's comes from the book Efficiency. That's where I'm trying to model it best off of.
Awesome.
Yep.
So a lot of listeners out there are, as you know, and a lot of these folks are joining your community. They want to know, what advice someone like yourself would give them. What, if you had to, sum up kind of your top 1 to 3 pieces of advice for sellers out there in 2025 who are grinding, who want to figure out their path to success? And maybe 3 is too much, but I guess, yeah, any parting words of wisdom for the listeners out there?
Yeah. So follow the money in every sense of the word. As you can see, we are in a volatile, market right now, depending on the vertical that you're selling into. New administration, capital is being reallocated different spaces, whether it's AI, cybersecurity, et cetera. But at the end of the day, the foundational principles stay the same, and that's logo, territory, and time, right? As long as you follow those 3 things, they're present in your current opportunity, you can find success and make a great career and make some great money out of staying inside of the software sales space.
Awesome. Where can folks find you? Of course, they can find you on Twitter, Fidel Cashflow. Where else would you drive listeners who are interested in checking out your content, your courses, your membership?
Yep. Fidel Cashflow, FIDEL CACHEFLOW on Twitter, and same thing on Telegram if you want to send me a direct message.
Awesome. This has been an amazing conversation, man. I feel like we have so much in common, and love to see what you're building, and really enjoying the content.
Again, appreciate the opportunity, and best of luck to you.
Thanks for coming on.